It was a warm afternoon in a bustling city when Officer Bradley, a seasoned police officer known for his stern demeanor, decided to patrol one of the city's busiest neighborhoods. As he cruised down the street in his squad car, he noticed a young black woman walking confidently on the sidewalk. She was dressed impeccably in a sleek blazer and carrying a leather bag, her strides full of purpose. Yet, something about her seemed to catch his attention, or perhaps his suspicion. Officer Bradley pulled his car to the side, stepping out and adjusting his belt. His towering figure and authoritative stance were enough to make most people nervous. He approached her, his expression serious, as she stopped in her tracks, calmly looking up at him. "Ma'am," he said, his voice sharp, "what are you doing in this neighborhood? Do you live around here?" The young woman, unshaken by his tone, gave a small smile. "I believe I'm free to walk wherever I choose," she responded politely. Her calmness only seemed to irk him more. Bradley, now visibly irritated, pressed further. "Let's see some ID," he demanded. As she reached into her bag, she glanced up at him with a steady gaze. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer immediately, his mind racing with assumptions. To him, she didn't seem to fit the profile of someone who belonged here. He thought he was doing his job, ensuring order in his city. But little did he know, this was not just any woman. In mere moments, his assumptions would come crashing down in the most humiliating way. What happens next will leave you questioning everything. Stay tuned, and don't forget to comment below. What would you do in her shoes? The young woman handed over her ID with a composed expression, her every move calm and deliberate. Officer Bradley snatched it, glancing at the name and details, his brow furrowed as he read, "Dr. Alana Carter." He looked back at her, surprised. "Doctor? What kind of doctor are you?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "I specialize in organizational leadership," she replied with a small, confident smile. "And I have some very important business in this area." Bradley, still holding her ID, seemed unconvinced. "Important business? You didn't answer my question earlier. What are you doing here? This doesn't look like the kind of place someone like you frequents." Alana raised an eyebrow, her smile unwavering. "Someone like me?" she asked, her tone light but pointed. "You mean someone who doesn't fit your expectations?" The officer shifted uncomfortably, his authoritative facade beginning to falter under her steady gaze. "Just doing my job," he muttered, handing her ID back. "You'd better keep moving." Alana slipped her ID back into her bag, her polite smile intact. "Thank you for your concern, officer," she said, walking away with a confident stride. Bradley watched her go, feeling a strange mix of annoyance and unease. Something about her calm demeanor, her refusal to be intimidated, didn't sit well with him. He didn't know who she was, but his gut told him she wasn't someone to underestimate. Later that afternoon, Bradley returned to his precinct, still thinking about the encounter. His colleagues were busy with their usual tasks, and he sat at his desk, trying to brush off the lingering sense of discomfort. Just as he was about to log into his computer, a buzz filled the room. "Attention, everyone," announced the precinct chief, standing at the door of the main office. "I'd like to introduce someone important." The room fell silent as all heads turned toward the entrance. There, standing with the same calm confidence as earlier, was Dr. Alana Carter. Bradley's jaw dropped. "This is Dr. Carter, the new commissioner overseeing our department," the chief continued, his voice filled with respect. "She's here to implement new reforms and ensure our precinct sets the standard for excellence." Bradley's face turned pale. The woman he'd questioned and dismissed earlier was now his superior. She met his wide-eyed gaze with a knowing smile, but didn't call him out in front of the room. Instead, she addressed everyone with poise. "Thank you for the warm welcome," Alana began, her voice commanding yet approachable. "I look forward to working with all of you to ensure our community is served with integrity, fairness, and respect. Let's aim to build trust and strengthen the bond between law enforcement and the people we serve." As she spoke, Bradley felt a knot tightening in his stomach. The confidence and authority she exuded now seemed almost overwhelming. He replayed their earlier encounter in his mind, every word and gesture now taking on new meaning. He had underestimated her, judged her, and treated her poorly based on nothing but his own assumptions. After the introduction, Alana stayed to speak with the officers individually, ensuring everyone felt heard. When it was Bradley's turn, he approached her hesitantly, the usual bravado gone from his demeanor. "Dr. Carter," he began, his voice lower than usual, "I'd like to apologize for earlier. I didn't realize who you were." She tilted her head, her smile still in place but her eyes sharp. "And would you have treated me differently if you did?" she asked softly. Bradley froze, realizing there was no easy answer to that question. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. He lowered his gaze, mumbling, "I'm sorry." "I appreciate your apology," she said, her tone firm yet forgiving. "But remember, respect shouldn't be tied to rank or identity. It should be given freely to everyone." Bradley nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He knew this moment would stay with him for a long time, a reminder of the lessons he had yet to learn. In the days that followed Dr. Alana Carter's introduction as the new commissioner, the precinct was abuzz with whispers and speculation. Officers exchanged knowing glances, some curious, others nervous. For Bradley, every moment felt like a ticking clock. The weight of his earlier encounter with Alana bore heavily on his mind. He had never been the type to reflect on his actions, but this time was different. This time, the person he had wronged was in a position of undeniable authority. Alana wasted no time in getting to work. Her approach was both strategic and transparent. She began by holding small group discussions with the officers, focusing on the challenges they faced and the changes they believed were needed. "If we want a better system," she often said, "we must start by understanding the people within it." Bradley attended one of these meetings reluctantly. He sat near the back, avoiding eye contact, hoping to fade into the background. But Alana, as perceptive as ever, noticed him immediately. Instead of calling him out, she directed her questions to the group as a whole. "What do you think is the biggest barrier to trust between law enforcement and the community?" she asked, her tone calm but probing. The room was silent at first. Then, an older officer spoke up. "People don't trust us because they think we don't understand them," he said. "And, to be honest, a lot of us don't." Alana nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for your honesty. Understanding starts with listening, and listening isn't just hearing words. It's about hearing the pain, the frustration, and the hope behind them." Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Her words struck a chord, stirring memories of the countless interactions he had brushed off or mishandled over the years. He wanted to speak, but the lump in his throat held him back. Later that week, Alana implemented a new initiative, ride-alongs with community leaders and residents. "If we're going to rebuild trust," she explained, "we need to see the world through their eyes." Each officer was paired with a volunteer from the community, someone who had expressed concerns or had been directly impacted by law enforcement. When Bradley's turn came, he was paired with an elderly man named Mr. Thomas, who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. As they rode through the familiar streets, Mr. Thomas shared stories of the community's struggles and resilience. "This neighborhood has been through a lot," he said, "but we've always held on to hope. What we need now is for those who serve us to See us as people, not problems. Bradley listened intently, his usual defensiveness replaced by a growing sense of humility. Mr. Thomas wasn't accusatory or bitter. He was simply sharing his truth. By the end of the ride, Bradley felt a connection he hadn't expected. "Thank you for sharing your perspective," he said sincerely as they returned to the precinct. Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "The real thanks will come when you turn what you've heard into action." The ride-alongs became a turning point for many officers, including Bradley. The initiative not only bridged gaps, but also laid the groundwork for meaningful dialogue. Alana monitored the program closely, making adjustments based on feedback from both officers and community members. One afternoon, as Bradley was filing a report, Alana approached him. "Officer Bradley," she said, her tone neutral but purposeful. "Do you have a moment?" He stood, his pulse quickening. "Of course, ma'am." She gestured for him to follow her to her office. Inside, she motioned for him to sit. "I wanted to check in with you," she began. "How have you found the ride-along program?" Bradley hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's been eye-opening," he admitted. "I think it's helped me see things from a different perspective." Alana nodded, her expression unreadable. "That's good to hear. Change starts with awareness." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "I want to be clear about something, Officer Bradley. I'm not here to hold grudges or humiliate anyone, but I do expect accountability for all of us." Bradley swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand, ma'am." "Good," she said, her tone softening, "because accountability isn't just about owning our mistakes. It's about learning from them and doing better moving forward." As he left her office, Bradley felt a mix of relief and resolve. He knew he had been given an opportunity, not just to redeem himself in Alana's eyes, but to become the kind of officer he had always aspired to be. Over the following months, the precinct underwent a transformation. Alana's leadership brought about changes that were both structural and cultural. New training programs focused on de-escalation, implicit bias, and community engagement. Officers were encouraged to participate in volunteer activities within the neighborhoods they served. Bradley, inspired by his interactions with Alana and the community, began mentoring new recruits. He shared his own experiences, emphasizing the importance of empathy and respect. "It's not about power," he often said. "It's about service." One day, during a community event hosted by the precinct, Alana and Bradley found themselves working side by side at a booth. As they handed out flyers and answered questions, a young boy approached them. "Are you the boss?" the boy asked Alana, his eyes wide with curiosity. She smiled warmly. "I suppose you could say that. But really, I'm just part of the team." The boy looked at Bradley, then back at Alana. "He listens now," he said matter-of-factly. "That's good, right?" Alana chuckled, glancing at Bradley. "That's very good." As the event wound down, Bradley approached Alana. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me a chance to grow." She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow, Officer Bradley. The real question is what you do with it." Bradley nodded, her words resonating deeply. He knew his journey was far from over, but he was determined to continue walking the path of growth and accountability. The precinct's efforts began to yield results. Crime rates decreased, community relations improved, and trust between residents and law enforcement grew stronger. Alana's vision was becoming a reality, one step at a time. And through it all, Bradley found himself transformed, not just as an officer, but as a person. He no longer saw his role as a position of authority, but as a responsibility to protect, serve, and uplift. The impact of Alana's leadership extended far beyond the precinct. Her story inspired reforms in other departments and sparked discussions about equity and justice across the nation. And for those who had doubted her or resisted her vision, her unwavering commitment proved to be the ultimate vindication. Months passed, and the changes brought by Dr. Alana Carter began to ripple beyond the precinct. Her leadership, marked by a combination of compassion and accountability, was a stark contrast to the rigid, fear-based management many officers had known. Slowly, a culture shift took hold. Officers began to see their roles not as enforcers of the law, but as stewards of the community they served. For Officer Bradley, these months were transformative. He had gone from being someone who operated with preconceived notions to a man eager to learn, grow, and make amends. The ride-alongs and his conversations with Alana had ignited a self-awareness that led him to question not just his actions, but his beliefs. More importantly, it drove him to rebuild the trust he had lost with those he had once mistreated. Bradley started volunteering at a local youth center where many kids from the community gathered after school. He taught basketball and offered mentoring sessions, often drawing on his own mistakes as lessons. "We all stumble," he told the kids one day after a game. "What matters is how we rise and what we do differently after we fall." One of the boys, Malik, approached Bradley after practice one evening. "You used to be scary," Malik said bluntly, his tone a mix of innocence and honesty. "But now you're kinda cool." Bradley chuckled, his heart warming at the comment. "Thanks, Malik. I'm working on being better every day." Meanwhile, Alana focused on creating partnerships with local organizations, businesses, and schools. She understood that true community safety was tied to opportunity, education, and trust. One of her most significant projects was a scholarship program for students pursuing criminal justice or social work degrees. The idea was to inspire the next generation to bring fresh perspectives to the field of law enforcement. The program's announcement was held at the precinct, where both officers and community members were invited. Alana stood at the podium, her voice clear and firm as she addressed the crowd. "This program is about investing in our future," she said. "It's about ensuring that the leaders of tomorrow are guided by the principles of justice, fairness, and humanity." Her words resonated deeply, sparking applause from the audience. Even those who had initially been skeptical of her leadership found themselves nodding in agreement. One of the most notable moments came when a young woman named Keisha, a scholarship recipient, took the stage. Keisha shared how she had once feared the police because of experiences in her neighborhood, but now aspired to be an officer herself, inspired by the changes she'd seen under Alana's leadership. "I want to make people feel safe," Keisha said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not scared. And I know I can do that because of the example set here." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Alana's eyes glistened with pride. This was the kind of change she had envisioned, one that would create a ripple effect, reaching far beyond what any single person could achieve. Bradley, standing in the back of the room, felt a surge of hope. For the first time in years, he saw law enforcement as a force for good, not just a job, but a calling. Inspired, he decided to take on more responsibility, signing up for leadership training and actively participating in community events. One day, while on patrol, Bradley encountered Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman he had once treated dismissively during a noise complaint. Seeing her now, he hesitated, unsure if she'd even want to speak to him. But before he could overthink it, she approached him. "Officer Bradley," she said, her tone soft but firm. "You've changed, haven't you?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm trying, ma'am. I know I didn't treat you right before, and I want to apologize for that." Mrs. Jenkins studied him for a moment, then smiled. It takes a strong person to admit they were wrong. Keep doing the right thing, son. Her words stayed with him, fueling his determination to continue his transformation. He realized that redemption wasn't just about saying sorry, it was about consistent action, proving through behavior that he had learned and grown. Meanwhile, Alana faced her own challenges. Despite her successes, there were still pockets of resistance within the department. Some officers resented her reforms, viewing them as an attack on tradition. But Alana, ever composed, addressed these concerns head-on. "Change is uncomfortable," she told the officers during a meeting. "But if we cling to outdated practices, we fail the very people we've sworn to protect, and we fail ourselves." Her words didn't win over everyone, but they planted seeds of doubt in the minds of her critics. Over time, many came to see the positive impact of her leadership. The turning point came during a precinct-wide assessment. Independent evaluators commended the department for its improved community relations and reduced complaints of misconduct. For the first time in years, the precinct was being recognized as a model for reform. At the celebratory event following the assessment, Alana stood before her team, her heart swelling with pride. "This is what happens when we work together," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is what happens when we choose accountability over complacency." As she looked out at the crowd, her eyes landed on Bradley. He stood taller than before, his demeanor one of quiet confidence and humility. In that moment, Alana knew she had made the right decision in giving him a chance. The precinct's story began to gain national attention. Journalists wrote about the reforms, highlighting Alana's leadership and the department's willingness to evolve. Community leaders from other cities reached out, eager to learn from their success. One day, Alana received an invitation to speak at a national conference on law enforcement reform. As she prepared her speech, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the tense roadside encounter with Bradley to the transformative work they had achieved together. When she took the stage at the conference, she began with a story. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said. "It happens one choice, one conversation, one action at a time. And sometimes it starts in the most unexpected places." Her words resonated deeply, leaving the audience inspired. Alana's leadership became a beacon of hope for departments across the country, proving that change was not only possible, but essential. Back at the precinct, life continued. Bradley, now a respected figure among his peers, often reflected on how far he had come. He knew he still had much to learn, but he also knew he was on the right path. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alana and Bradley found themselves standing outside the precinct, watching the lights flicker on in the surrounding buildings. "You've done good work, Officer Bradley," Alana said, her tone warm. "Thank you, ma'am," he replied. "But it's not just me. It's everyone here, following your lead." Alana smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice," she said. "It's about lifting others up, and you've done that." As they stood there, the weight of their shared journey settled between them, a testament to the power of growth, accountability, and hope. Together they had proven that even in the face of adversity, transformation was possible. Would you like me to move on to the final part or provide an uplifting ending for engagement? The precinct's transformation wasn't just a momentary victory. It became a movement that inspired the entire city. Under Dr. Alana Carter's leadership, the department introduced new initiatives designed to deepen the connection between law enforcement and the community. These efforts were aimed at breaking down barriers, rebuilding trust, and fostering a sense of unity. Bradley was among the first to volunteer for one of these programs. a mentorship initiative pairing officers with at-risk youth. The idea was to build relationships and offer guidance to kids who might otherwise view the police with fear or resentment. Bradley's mentee was a teenager named Jamal, who had recently been in trouble for minor offenses. At their first meeting, Jamal was guarded, his body language tense. "What's the point of this?" he asked skeptically. "Cops don't care about kids like me." Bradley took a deep breath, remembering his own journey. "I used to be like that too," he admitted. "I thought people didn't care, but I've learned that change starts when we're willing to give each other a chance." Jamal studied him for a moment, his skepticism softening. "You don't seem like most cops." "Maybe that's because I've had to learn the hard way," Bradley replied with a small smile. Over the next few months, Bradley and Jamal built a rapport. They spent time playing basketball, working on homework, and talking about Jamal's dreams. Slowly but surely, Jamal's view of the police began to shift. Meanwhile, Alana continued to push for systemic reform. She worked tirelessly to ensure the precinct became a model of accountability and fairness. One of her proudest achievements was the implementation of regular community feedback sessions, where residents could voice their concerns and suggest improvements. During one of these sessions, a man named Mr. Harris stood up to speak. He was a longtime critic of the police, having experienced firsthand the injustices that many in his neighborhood faced. "I'll admit, I didn't trust you when you first came here, Dr. Carter," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "But seeing the changes you've made, it's given me hope. I see officers walking the beat now, talking to people, treating them like neighbors instead of suspects. That's what we've needed for a long time." Alana nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. Change isn't easy, but it's worth it. And it's only possible when we work together." Her words were met with applause, a sign of how far the precinct had come. The once fractured relationship between the police and the community was beginning to heal. Bradley, too, was making strides. His mentorship with Jamal was a success, and he found himself becoming a role model for other officers. He started leading workshops on cultural sensitivity and community engagement, sharing his own experiences as a cautionary tale. "I used to think being an officer was about authority," he told a group of recruits one day. "But it's really about service. And the moment you forget that, you lose the trust of the people you're here to protect." The recruits listened intently, their expressions serious. Bradley could see the impact of his words, and it gave him a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The precinct's success began to attract attention from neighboring cities. Alana was invited to speak at conferences, sharing the strategies that had worked for her team. Her story, and Bradley's transformation, became powerful examples of what was possible when accountability and empathy were prioritized. One day, Alana received an email from a woman named Marcia, a police chief in a neighboring city. "Your story has inspired me to push for change in my own department," the email read. "Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to do the right thing." Alana shared the email with Bradley, who smiled as he read it. "You've built something incredible here, Dr. Carter," he said. "We've built it together," she replied. As the months turned into years, the precinct's reforms became deeply ingrained in its culture. Officers like Bradley, who had once been resistant to change, became its strongest advocates. The community, once wary and distrustful, began to see the department as an ally. One of the most touching moments came during a community event hosted by the precinct. Families gathered at the park for food, games, and music. Jamal, now a confident young man on the verge of graduating high school, approached Bradley with a big smile. "I got accepted to college," Jamal said, holding up his acceptance letter, "and I wanted you to be the first to know." Bradley's eyes filled with pride. "Jamal, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." Jamal nodded, his smile widening. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. You believed in me when no one else did." The moment was a powerful reminder of the impact one person could have. Bradley had come full circle, transforming from someone who perpetuated harm to someone who created hope. As the sun set on the event, Alana stood at the edge of the crowd, watching families laugh and play. Bradley joined her, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "You've done something amazing here," he said. Alana shook her head. "We've done something amazing. And it's only the beginning." Bradley nodded, his heart full. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud to wear this badge now." Alana smiled, her own heart swelling with pride. Together, they had turned a moment of conflict into a movement of change, proving that even in the face of adversity, transformation was possible. The story of Alana, Bradley, and the precinct became a symbol of hope for communities across the nation. It showed that change wasn't just a dream. It was a choice, made one step, one conversation, and one action at a time. What do you think about the power of redemption and change? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how stories like this inspire you to make a difference in your own community. Don't forget to share and subscribe for more powerful stories of transformation. The tension in the room was palpable as Officer Brad still struggled to process the incredible shift in power dynamics. Olivia, now sitting confidently at her desk, was no longer the soft-spoken young woman he had pulled over earlier. The badge she wore represented authority, and her position as his new superior added a layer of undeniable gravity. Brad's mind raced with regret and embarrassment as memories of their earlier interaction replayed in his mind like a humiliating movie. Olivia, on the other hand, carried herself with poise and control. She leaned forward slightly, clasping her hands as she looked directly at Brad. Her voice was calm but firm as she began addressing the team. "Before we begin today's briefing, I want to make one thing clear. In this department, respect is not optional. It is a requirement, no matter someone's rank, role, or background." Brad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. Olivia wasn't just addressing the team, she was delivering a message directly to him. Over the next several weeks, Olivia worked tirelessly to establish a culture of accountability and equity within the department. Her first initiative focused on implementing mandatory training sessions on bias awareness and respectful conduct. These sessions weren't just lectures. They were immersive experiences designed to make officers confront the implicit prejudices that affected their interactions with the public. Brad initially resisted the changes. During the first training session, he sat in the back, arms crossed, a skeptical smirk on his face. But as the trainer shared powerful stories of individuals who had been unjustly treated, something began to shift in him. It wasn't immediate, but the stories pierced through his defensive exterior, forcing him to see the human cost of his actions and attitudes. Meanwhile, Olivia took the time to build relationships within the department. She had one-on-one meetings with every officer, including Brad. During their meeting, she asked him pointedly, "Why did you become a police officer?" Caught off guard, Brad stammered, "To serve and protect, I guess." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's start living up to that together. Serving and protecting means treating everyone, regardless of who they are, with dignity." Brad didn't respond, but the words stayed with him long after the meeting ended. For the first time in years, he started to reflect on why he had become a cop and where he had gone astray. The community also began to notice the changes under Olivia's leadership. Citizens who had once been skeptical of the department's intentions were now seeing a genuine effort to rebuild trust. Neighborhood meetings became regular events where officers and residents could voice concerns and work together to find solutions. Olivia encouraged open dialogue, ensuring that everyone felt heard and respected. One particularly emotional moment came when a young girl approached Olivia during a community event. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Thank you for making me feel safe again." Olivia knelt to the girl's level, her voice filled with warmth as she replied, "That's why we're here, to protect you and everyone in this community." Brad happened to witness the exchange from a distance, and it struck a chord deep within him. He realized that Olivia's leadership wasn't just about enforcing rules or improving optics. It was about restoring humanity to a role that had lost its way. Over time, Brad began to change. He started volunteering for community outreach programs, working with local youth to build positive relationships with law enforcement. He also became an advocate for the very training sessions he'd once resisted, encouraging his fellow officers to embrace the changes Olivia had implemented. One day, Brad approached Olivia in her office. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. "I've been wrong, not just to you, but to the people I'm supposed to serve. I want to do better." Olivia looked at him for a moment, her expression softening. "Apologies are a good start," she said, "but real change comes from action. Let's make it happen." From that moment on, Brad became one of Olivia's strongest allies. Together, they worked to transform the department into a model of integrity and fairness. Brad even began mentoring new recruits, sharing his own journey as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and complacency. As the months turned into years, Olivia's leadership became a beacon of hope, not just for her department but for the entire community. The changes she implemented had a ripple effect, inspiring other departments to adopt similar reforms. Media outlets picked up her story, showcasing her as a symbol of resilience, progress, and the power of second chances. Brad's transformation also became part of the narrative. He often spoke at public events, sharing his journey from skepticism to advocacy. "I used to think respect was something you demanded, not something you earned," he said during one speech. "But Olivia taught me that real strength comes from humility and empathy." The department saw measurable improvements under Olivia's leadership. Complaints of misconduct dropped significantly, and public trust in law enforcement rose to levels that hadn't been seen in decades. Officers began taking pride in their work, knowing that they were making a positive impact. The story of Olivia and Brad serves as a powerful reminder that change is possible, even in the most entrenched systems. It shows that when we confront our biases, listen to one another, and strive for mutual respect, we can build bridges where there were once walls. What would you do if you were in Olivia's position? Could you lead with the same grace and determination? And if you were in Brad's shoes, would you have the courage to admit your mistakes and change? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this inspiring journey of growth and transformation. This is more than just a story. It's a call to action for all of us to reflect on our own biases and strive to create a world where respect and fairness are the norm, not the exception. Share this story if it moved you, and let's keep the conversation going. Together, we can inspire change.